As the temps start rising, I feel the familiar urge to refresh my closet, but I don't want to waste money on pieces I'll only wear once or for just one season. Thankfully, Quince changes that. Their clothes are timeless, lightweight, and far more elevated than anything else at this price. It finally feels like my wardrobe matches my standards. The best part is that Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes, so you get to look good while feeling good. I'm pretty excited that I have upgraded my athleisure wardrobe for this summer. I bought a sweatshirt and a pair of wide-leg flow pants that are two of the softest items I own, and I plan to live in them. So join me in giving your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/POTC for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/POTC to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/POTC.
Go to places that force you to give a story or a presentation in public that are not about work. Whether this is a poetry reading, whether this is your local debate club or a storytelling platform, there's so many really interesting groups out there where people come together to share philosophy or culture or art in a public speaking format without resorting to corporate lingo and to hiding behind what you're doing at work. And I'm telling you, it's gonna help you be better at presenting, whether it's your art or whether it's your Excel files or your report or whatever you're doing at work.
That was Alina Nikolaou on Psychologists Off the Clock.
We are 5 experts in psychology here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, a clinical psychologist practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, and author of Act for Burnout, Act Daily Journal, and the Act Daily Card Deck.
From America's Heartland, I'm Dr. Emily Edlin, a clinical psychologist based in Chicago, Illinois, and author of Autonomy Supportive Parenting.
I'm Yael Schoenbrunn, a clinical psychologist, faculty at Brown University, author of Work, Parent Thrive, and a biweekly newsletter on relationships.
Calling in from Vienna, Austria, I'm Michael Herold, ACT coach, confidence trainer, and author of an upcoming book on being a better conversationalist and making friends.
And from coastal New England, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty, The Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and Imposter No More.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. Hi everyone, this is Michael. For this week's interview, I sat together with Dr. Alina Nikolaou. She's the director and curator of a TED conference in Europe. So we talk about TED events, TED Talks, TEDx events, TEDx Talks. If you don't know what those are, we will get into that at the beginning of the interview. We also talk about what these conferences are like, both in front of the curtain and behind the curtain. We talk about insider tips and techniques that take public speaking to the next level. And I also pick Alina's brain on how to turn a presentation that you might have to give at work into one that is a little bit more memorable and entertaining than what we usually get at work presentations. So I've given a TEDx talk nearly 10 years ago now, and I'm joined by POTC's other TEDx speaker, Jill. So what were your thoughts on this discussion, Jill?
Well, first of all, I thought this was just a really cool topic. And one of the things that Alina says is how so many people will say to her, oh, it's on my bucket list to give a TED Talk. And that's exactly how I described wanting to do a TED Talk. And, you know, for me, it was on my bucket list, but something I thought I would do quite a lot later, like when I felt more confident and more ready and all the things, because it just seemed like such a big thing to do. And a lot of the talks I give now, I use my TED as an example of doing it in the presence of fear, because of course, like doing a TED event is a big deal. And so when you're doing something that's challenging and that you care about doing really well, like of course there's going to be some anxiety, fear, self-doubt. And so the reason I bring that up is because I don't want that to stop listeners. And for anyone who is listening, who's ever thought, maybe I'd like to do a TEDx talk at some point, I really encourage you to do it. And I think a great first step, it's what I did, is I highly recommend Chris Anderson's amazing book. It's called TED Talks, the official TED guide to public speaking. And he walks you through, what an idea worth sharing is and is not, and just all sorts of steps. So before you dismiss it, read the book and then see. Did you read that book, Michael, when you prepared for yours?
I read the book. I think I read it after I gave my talk, which, gave a lot of my friends the perfect gift idea for Michael. I'm just going to give him that book. And many years ago, after I gave my TEDx talk, I did my public speaking training by a mentor who put me under his wings, a public speaker that was fairly known in the United States. His name was Sean Stevenson, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. But Sean was a public speaker that I really looked up to. And he was kind enough to take me under his wings for a couple of months and train me up as a public speaker before I got the opportunity to speak at TEDx. And then the folks at TEDx gave me another couple of months of coaching before they allowed me to go up on stage and give that talk. And by the way, I loved my coaching. I loved the coaching that I got from them. And I also was curious afterwards, and I asked them, what do people think about these coaching sessions? Do they show up? And they told me, well, many don't think they need to show up. They think they're good enough already, so they don't want to show up. And we're very clear with them that if they don't show up, they don't go up on stage. So I thought that was really interesting, that there's this level of quality that they want to see.
Yeah, and you can see it in every TED or TEDx talk you watch. There really is a bit of a formula, and they're all like really high quality. You and I were talking before we hit record, just kind of wondering out loud about, what is it that makes some of these talks absolutely catapult into millions of views versus others that are just kind of, die on the vine or don't get as many views. And we don't really know, but you had a really interesting thought that I think is a great hypothesis.
Yeah. So, of course, there are many reasons. How timely are they? How well received are they? There's luck involved. I will say that I think an underrated part of it, and maybe it was just underrated for me, is the title of the talk, which is so important for YouTube to pick this and show it to you. And then nowadays we all know what clickbait is. And I'm not saying like a TEDx talk should be titled like clickbait, but it should create some curiosity around it. And that was certainly a mistake I think I made with my talk, where the entire conference I spoke at was titled What If? That was the theme of the conference. And so every talk had to start with what if ... and then came the title of the talk. And so my title was What If I Had a Time Machine, which was, I think, a really beautiful title for what I talked about. And it's not something that you click on when it pops up on YouTube.
Yeah.
At least not to the degree that, other videos entice you to click on it.
Yeah. We want to encourage listeners, do it even if you're feeling scared. When you do it, think of a great title, read Chris Anderson's book. And then I think the other thing is just like, how do I even find a TED event? And most major cities, as far as I know, do have them. So even if you just look at whatever the city is that's closest to you and see, they're usually once a year, and they usually take applications at least 6 months in advance. Some have rules. So for example, we have one up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire coming up next month, and you have to live within 30 miles. Whereas other ones you can apply from anywhere across the country or the world. And they usually have those rules laid out clearly on the website. You can sign up for their newsletter. If they're not accepting applications right now, you can usually sign up to be informed when those applications will open. So I would love to just encourage everybody to do a little digging if this is something that you've been thinking about doing.
And also consider the idea of joining a TED or TEDx event and just be a member of the audience and watch the magic unfold, because it is quite something different to see those on your computer screen while you're going through YouTube and being at an actual event and networking with people and getting a feeling for the curiosity that goes on at these events and the willingness to communicate about all those brave and new ideas that people are discussing.
Absolutely. It's really something. I went to the TED Women event in Palm Springs years ago, and it was pricey. It's probably just a one-time thing because it was pricey, but it was incredible and really worth it. And I'm hoping to get tickets to the TEDx that's coming here next month.
So, and just as a totally selfless plug, we will put both Chill's and my TEDx talk into the show notes as well for your viewing pleasure. And in the meantime, I hope that you enjoy my interview with Dr. Alina Nikolaou. Dr. Alina Nikolaou is the co-founder, director, and curator of TED AI Vienna, the first TED event in Europe dedicated to groundbreaking ideas on artificial intelligence. Born to Greek and Austrian parents, Alina grew up during the financial crisis in Athens, Greece. After school, she moved to Vienna, Austria to graduate with degrees in communication science and political science. Constantly fascinated with the hypes, hopes, and fears that surround new technologies, Alina has been a curator at TEDx Vienna since 2019. There she specializes on interdisciplinary ideas about tech, philosophy, and power, and brings them to life in the form of TEDx Talks. Alina, it is so good to have you here. I'm so looking forward to our conversation today.
It's so good to be here, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm super excited to be part of this.
So a lot of our listeners, I assume, know TED or TEDx Talks from the comfort of their home. They watch this, I would assume, on either TED.com or on YouTube. And to those listeners who now think, wait, what is this TED? What are these TED Talks Michael and Alina are talking about? Let's bring them into the fold as well and just quickly give an overview of what TED is and also what TEDx is, because those are slightly different formats.
Sure. So most likely, just like you said, most people do know TED from YouTube or from online, right? Where you watch those 18-minute talks about one specific idea that is original or fresh or new. And it's either from global thought leaders or people you've never heard of, but whose work is just incredible and incredibly moving and inspirational. So there's TED on the one side, TED with a base in North America that hosts the big flagship conference once in a year in Vancouver, but other big events as well, such as in Atlanta. And here you have this big premium conference with global thought leaders coming together for a 5-day experience to share either TED Talks or spotlight conversations and really dig deep into exciting matters. And then there's the TEDx program, which is TED's license program. This is how TED brings their brand and their format to your home, to your local community, to your local city, and through a license that you don't pay for, you just make sure that you, meet the quality criteria that makes the TED magic happen. You can organize a TED-like event in your neighborhood, either with local speakers or with speakers that you bring specifically in to your local community. I have been part of the local community of TEDx here in Vienna for, let me think, 10 years now. I think It's one of the longest running things I've done in my life. And part of an official TED event for 2 years, because I've been managing and I've been having the privilege of hosting a smaller TED event focusing on AI and innovation here in Europe. And I love the format. I think that it comes with so many beautiful aspects when it comes to sharing science and tech and storytelling. And I hope we have enough time for me to break everything down today.
Oh, I won't let you go unless we have broken everything down, because this is like the amazing opportunity for me to talk with you is to show people like how this stuff unfolds behind the stage and also in front of the stage. So if you're up for it, I will walk people through what it's like to be a participant at a TEDx event. And then you give us a little bit of an overview of what it's like to be in the organizer side behind the curtain. So I'm thinking back to my first TEDx conference that I went to, which was 10 years ago. So we seem to line up there.
Wow.
And I traveled there. This was in Vienna. And I traveled there, and this was this beautiful theater building, this huge old building, the Volkstheater. And I got there, and I could already tell from a distance, like, these are my people. They were like a crowd of hundreds of people gathered in front of the theater. The organizers, the team was handing out croissants and coffee to everyone waiting in line. We got in, we got our name tag. And then you could tell that you were among people that wanted to exchange ideas. You could turn to anyone and start talking and just talk about the upcoming talks we're excited about. And then we went into this magnificent theater hall, took our seat, the curtain opened, and on stage came one of the curators. There were two that would alternate. And they would come up, they would give a brief introduction of the talk that was coming up, and then a person would walk up on stage, usually terribly nervous, and then take their place in front of the TEDx symbol on the red carpet, and they would do a talk that was anywhere between 10 to 18 minutes. And that would repeat throughout the entire day. There would be food, there would be snacks, there would be exhibitions, there would be a lot of opportunity between talks to look at things. Like some of the speakers would bring exhibitions. They would bring technology that you could then actually look at and try out during the breaks. And what really stands out for me is this entire feeling of community, of talking with people and meeting so many interesting people, up to and including the after party that then goes until like late in the morning hours in some club somewhere which we all leave when we're somewhat overly refreshed. And then everyone's just excited to come back the next year. That's my experience. What is it on the other end?
Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit of time travel because my experience starts months before that. And of course, it always depends on the curator and how you curate and the focus that you have. But in my case, we start searching for exciting ideas to showcase on the stage months in advance. And I'm saying 6 months in advance and even before.
Hey everybody, it's Jill here, and I am super excited to announce that I will be speaking at one of the largest and truly most inspiring and meaningful psychotherapy conferences we have here in the US, the Psychotherapy Networker Conference. Other speakers include Esther Perel, John Kabat-Zinn, Ramani Durvasula, David Kessler, and so many more. I am just thrilled and honored to be among this esteemed faculty. The conference is being held March 20th to the 23rd in Washington, D.C., and if you register now, you can get early bird rates and save up to 40%. Plus, you can get an additional $50 off when you use the code SYM50. That's SYM50. So go to our website, offtheclockpsych.com, and click on our books and offers page and register today.
This is actually something that is, I think, hugely interesting to discuss. This part of how do you pick your speakers? What is the process from having that rough idea to sending that email or getting someone up on stage?
Exactly. Let's start with that. So I spend a big chunk of my time in the beginning of the conference cycle, one could say, so about 9 months before the actual event, searching very weird, odd corners of the internet and searching for interesting ideas there. Whether this is a Reddit forum, whether this is a podcast, whether this is a YouTube channel, or a tiny entry of a local university, I'm really looking for ideas that stand out, that I'll be remembering 5 days afterwards. And those don't need to be ideas necessarily that I agree with. They can be ideas that are weird or unique and that make me think. And then I try to find the person behind this idea. This can be either a leading global academic, a scholar, a thought leader, or it can be somebody of whom you've never heard before in your life, but they are the rock stars in their niche field. And then we are reaching out. We're explaining the format. We're explaining the magic of TED, and we are asking for a proposal. So here is where the speaker can flesh out what they would roughly like to speak about and what the essence of this idea is. And then we're going back and forth. Sometimes we're asking for a second, a third, a fourth proposal. Sometimes we question the science behind it and the scientific accuracy of the claims made. And sometimes we reject the proposal simply because it just doesn't fit with the bigger vision of the conference and how it's put together. But eventually we agree and we bring the speaker on board, and then we start actually curating and coaching. So we sit down, we lay out this entire story that they want to say. We cut usually 1/3 of it because you don't have enough time. And it's always, I think for me, the most exciting task to separate between story and idea. Because the story is the packaging, right? It's the who, what, when, it's the what's next of the structure. But it's the idea that glues everything together. It's the why and this abstract, perhaps even more philosophical notion that glues the story together. And if both of those things work well and are nicely weaved into each other, it can be a very, very good talk at the end of the day. So this coaching and this curating goes on for about 3 months, typically. And then the speaker, they have their script, they have their notes, and the time comes for them to go on stage and actually do the presenting.
Before we go to the heart racing moment of that speaker going on stage, would you mind talking us through the numbers? How many speakers do you have at an event, and to how many speakers do you reach out so that they send in their proposals? There's some filtering process involved, I would assume. So not everyone who you reach out to then gets a guaranteed spot on stage.
Of course not. So I'm starting out with a canvas or a landscape of ideas that I want to fill. So I'm starting out looking at interesting ideas in tech, in science, in arts, and then I see where it takes me. And usually we reach out sometimes even to 100 people, more than 100 people, until we find those 20 ideas that we think really should be on that stage. And this is something, by the way, this is a secret that you won't realize is happening if you only watch TED or TEDx talks on YouTube. There's, at least for me, an entire recipe or an entire way of putting those talks together. So the order of who's the first speaker, who's the second, how do we close the event? For me, this really needs to make sense, because at the end of the day, I want you to go home and feel that you just consumed a book of ideas, and each talk was a chapter, and the first and the last, if you squeeze all of these ideas together, actually create an entire program that is coherent and that makes sense within itself.
That is actually something, now that you say it, I can totally confirm this. My main memory to the end of each TEDx event is that my brain is just overheated and there's smoke coming out of my ears because there's so much information that comes in and so much scribbling that happens on notebooks. But now that you say that there's actually a line that connects those talks, as opposed to the YouTube algorithm that just gives you the next one, that is so true. That's so interesting to hear that.
And look, there's always the need to open a conference, whether it's TED or whether it's a different type of event, right? To open it with something that is bold. Yeah. You really need to get people's attention, to get them off their feet and just make them excited for more. Then you need to make space for a more quiet, a more intimate idea, to offer them the space to breathe and to relax and to look inward. You need to offer them ideas that are going to be so weird that they're just going to ask themselves, why am I here? Why am I listening to this exactly? And then you need to finish the day with something that inspires hope and realistic optimism, because this is primarily what we do at TED and at TEDx, right? It's working towards a world that is more hopeful, but still has an essence of realism and pragmatism in it.
That is so interesting for someone listening who thinks, well, I don't have the most surprising or rattling topic. Mine is a little bit weird. Well, good news. Like, there might be a spot for you, because there might be a TEDx conference out there who's still missing that weird talk in the middle. Okay, so you said two more things that I want to dig into. One is the bringing it down to 1/3 of the length is, I think, what you said. So TEDx talks or TED talks, it's always weird to, I think from here on out, I'm just going to use either one. And dear listener, know that I mean both. They're usually, I think they're capped at 18 minutes. And I realize now, this brings back some moment that might have made me wake up at night screaming more often than I want to admit, that when I was preparing my TEDx talk, I had made a somewhat negotiation mistake with my speaker coach, where I had committed to, I think, a 12-minute talk. And then it turned into a 15-minute talk, which doesn't sound like a lot. But when you craft a talk like you do for a TED talk, where every word, every sentence, every paragraph is crafted, and now you have to take out 3 minutes, which is 450 words. That's quite a bit.
You know what is really striking, Michael? It's that 18 minutes seemed so short 10 years ago. I remember speakers asking me, how do I break everything down? How do I boil my decades of work down to 18 minutes? And now 18 minutes, they're just too long. It's just oftentimes too long for people. I could watch 300,000 TikToks that are much more entertaining for a second to my brain, rather than one 18-minute TED Talk. So yeah, the media landscape is changing, and us at TEDx and TED, we do adapt. I think there is definitely a way of presenting an idea in only 10 minutes. Sometimes if the idea is so good and so bold, it doesn't even need more. But of course, there's some ideas that need space to unfold. So what we do as conference organizers is we create and we craft the spaces after what happens on the main stage to invite people to actually discuss what they just heard. Now, whether this is a discovery session where you sit in a workshop and you really dig deep and deeper into what you just heard, or whether it's a panel with other experts where the TED speaker can elaborate a little bit more on what they shared a little bit or a while beforehand, or whether it's even a tour or an adventure that gets you out of the venue to really explore throughout the city or out in the open, that helps you digest the idea in a better way than just over a quick coffee. So it's on the one side really making sure that what you present on stage as a speaker is crisp and clear and brings the message across, but it's also our responsibility as organizers to make sure there's enough spaces to extend those conversations afterwards.
Okay, then back to the stage. Now we have a super nervous speaker person behind the curtain. What happens next from the standpoint of the organizers?
Well, you're on your own there. No, just kidding. Look, I think I do know speakers that practice their talk a million times in front of the mirror, in front of friends, in front of colleagues. And I know often speakers that just run over it once, go up there and are so comfortable with it that it feels like they're just speaking inside of their living room. I think this is incredibly subjective, and this brings us to public speaking, right? It's such an incredibly subjective experience because we all go through a different cocktail of emotions, from panic to confidence to this afterglow and energy rush that we have after we've spoken to a bunch of strangers that looked at us for a while. But in general, I think if the script is there, if you feel that this is something that, if this is an idea that you're proud of, if you think this is an idea that people should know of, this is already 70% of the game. Because even if you're not the most perfect public speaker. And let's be honest, nobody is. Everybody makes mistakes. This is usually also why people like you when you're on stage. If you do a couple of mistakes or you laugh a little bit weirdly, this is what actually authentically connects you to the audience. So I always advise to be yourself as much as possible and to really not try to imitate somebody's style that you saw online and that you think worked for them, because at the end of the day, this is your talk, this is your idea, and it should feel and it should sound like you, even if you're anxious and panicking inside.
So I'm curious about the preparation part that you said. People that they're so in love with their topic and they're so deep in their topic, you can put them up on the stage and they will talk about it. And it's probably the biggest problem to drag them off after their timer ran out. And then there are those that just need to prep this a lot, whether they have bullet points they work with or whether they have their script written out verbatim. So I would be curious about the preparation process that you as coaches behind the stage or in preparation for the event that you walk people through. What would, like, if there are any requirements, any recommendations you make? And I'm specifically curious about something that I've seen with people preparing for talks. So when I train people on their confidence, it's often for a presentation, a public talk, and their bottleneck in their presentation that I oftentimes see is that they will rehearse a talk so many times that they are very confident giving it in their living room, in front of their bathroom mirror, and they're really good at it. Not taking into consideration that once you put someone like that in front of 1,000 people, that living room rehearsal goes out of the window. It's that valley of awkwardness where it will flow very easily because you're relaxed and you're in your living room, but your preparation isn't solid enough yet to deal with the added adrenaline and heart rate and stress that comes with the lights, with the quietness, with the cameras running, with the people coughing. But do you have any guidelines around this? Any like warnings that you send out to make people aware of this like valley of awkwardness?
I think I have 2 rules here. And again, these things have worked for me. So whenever I've hosted an event, these 2 tips have worked for me. They have worked for some speakers, but again, they don't always work for everybody. But the first rule or the first tip is you will feel embarrassed. This will happen. No matter how perfect you present, there will come a second, even if the audience itself doesn't notice, where you're going to feel embarrassed because your slides are mixed up, or you lose your train of thought, or because this one sentence that you want to, get out perfectly didn't come out as perfectly, or typically because you have rehearsed a joke and then only one person laughed in the audience. So you're going to feel a little bit embarrassed at one point. Just let that pass. Don't spend time thinking about it. It's normal. It's human. So I think going into such a very high stakes and high pressure experience with the knowledge that there will be a moment of vulnerability and of human embarrassment already gives you the permission to be a bit more forgiving with yourself and a bit more nice to yourself and not that strict. So that is my first rule. The second rule or the second tip is when rehearsing, try not to learn your script or your presentation by heart. Again, everybody's different, but I've seen that presentations and talks are delivered best and the most persuasively if the speaker hasn't learned their script by heart and instead has learned it as if they're sharing a fairy tale. So, for example, pick a fairy tale that you loved as a child or still love.
Okay, so what about the Little Red Riding Hood, where I don't want to spoil the story in case children are listening, but if there are children listening with you in the car right now, either stop the podcast or put them out of the car and keep driving and listening.
Fantastic. So the Red Riding Hood, let's pick this one. So the point is, you don't know this fairy tale by heart, right? You don't know it line for line. You don't have a specific set of prefixed words on how to begin and end it. But you know what happens. You know what the main points of the story are. You know what the main feelings and emotions that the story triggers are. And depending on whom you share that story with, you emphasize different scenes. You might emphasize a scene of exploration, curiosity, where she explores the forest on her way to the grandma. Or you might emphasize the fear and the shock when she realizes, okay, there's a wolf there instead of my grandma. But you don't know it by heart. And this is how I think it helps to rehearse for a talk. Meaning, you know the main points of the story, you know the main point of your idea, and the sections that you feel are worthy of emphasis, but you don't learn it by heart. Because if you learn it by heart, I have seen speakers, believe me, I have seen speakers that are professional on what they're doing up there. But when they lose one sentence, the rest of them gets lost in darkness as well. So again, think of it as a fairy tale. I think this is my second tip. And I've seen it really work for many, many people out there.
I can see that work. I have to admit, I am one of those that I write out my speeches and I give them verbatim.
Really?
But I warn, I only do this. I don't give many talks anymore because I know how much work it is. Because once you do this verbatim, you really need to commit. If it's a, shall we say, less important talk, I will have bullet points. But if it's like a really high prestige talk, I will have written it out, but fully knowing that this is going to take I'm going to lock this in 2 months before the event. And then it's just rehearsing, because yes, if you then slip, if you only hit this 95% mark, you're going into darkness. Absolutely.
Yeah. And think about it. Usually if one has an original idea and they're lucky, they only get to give one TEDx or one TED talk in their life. And it's recorded, it's out there. Everybody can watch it. And this pressure, but also this opportunity to share your work and your ideas with the world is immense. So I totally understand this pressure and this wish to write everything out and control the situation, because this is what it all boils down to, right? If you have learned your script by heart, you feel that you have a sense of control of what happens. Yep. But I don't know how you have experienced it. I feel that public speaking is oftentimes just letting go of control and also interacting with the audience, seeing how they respond to your pace, your attitude, and then flexibly and spontaneously adapting in that moment. But of course, this takes time. And I think it just takes a lot of training to get there at the end of the day.
That is, I think, the sense of public speaking in general. You can't expect to get this super right the very first time you do it. You're going to be scared. You don't know what's going to happen. Things are going to go wrong. And you do this for the 100th time and you actually appreciate things going wrong because A, you fully expected this, and B, it gives you that moment of connection with the audience. But it's that process of going through that many, many, many times. And I also find that you learn that the audience looks at you as the speaker as the one who gives the direction. I remember this one speaker, this was a beautiful moment, who blanked in his talk. Totally cool, like a cucumber, reached for his pocket, pulled out a piece of paper, unfolded the piece of paper, read through it, looked at the audience, grinned and said, put the paper back and continued. And I think something like that either comes with having done this many, many times. I think I hit a vein of gold here. Earlier, you were talking about interweaving the message and the story. In my understanding, the story is kind of the transport vehicle. It's the spoonful of sugar that makes the medicine go down, just to put some earworm into everyone's brain at this point, which you'll hum for the rest of the day, as will I. How do we go about this weaving, the story, the message part?
I think here, many people who know the format of a TED or a TEDx talk, they think of this format having a very clear recipe on how to structure the story, which I largely disagree with. I think oftentimes people believe that if they start their talk with a heavily emotional anecdote, they will catch people's attention immediately and then basically just lay the groundwork for the idea that then comes. But this can backfire oftentimes. People might not be ready for you to just pour your heart out, and people maybe also culturally, or depending on so many different factors, may not be ready for such an opening. And I think, yeah, of course, emotion does play a role and it comes in different facets, but opening up with a super emotional story in the beginning isn't for everybody. It isn't for every presentation or talk. And it's also not one of the golden standards that you will see at the TED or TEDx format. So there's not really a clear recipe or something that works for everybody. I think it always is a good mixture or a set of waves between entertainment and information, regardless whether this is science or tech. But you always need to make sure that you keep people's attention, right? The currency that we are currently seeing being relevant all over the world is having people's attention. And you get that with interweaving an entertaining piece of information or something more lighthearted with then something that is a bit more heavy, whether this is a mathematical formula or a new technical gadget that you're presenting on stage. And I think what is really important to mention, and I think many people listening in kind of have that in the back of their heads, I feel that as consumers, especially of the Western internet or the English-speaking internet, we have a very specific expectation of what it means to give a good presentation. It's very extroverted and loud with big dramatic gestures, and the story needs to be super emotional, and it needs to have a cyclic ending at the end. And I strongly disagree with that. Sometimes you can give a presentation that is a very calm and silent story that is complementing a very loud idea. Sometimes you can package it in a poem and it works wonderfully. Sometimes it can just be a chronological order of what has happened for you to arrive at this idea. I have seen so many different formats. At the end of the day, it also depends on your style as an artist, right? And what kind of storytelling form suits you best. But there's no one size fits all. But on that, because you asked me before and whether I have any tips or recommendations, in order to find out what type of storytelling and in turn what type of presentation giving suits you best, I oftentimes recommend stop giving presentations only for work. Because giving a presentation for work, whether this is at a big conference or at a meeting, at one of your weekly gatherings, can help you to shield yourself in corporate lingo, or by already having the identity of being the representative of company XYZ. But it doesn't give you the opportunity to be vulnerable, which, as we said beforehand, is one of the essential issues and the ingredients of a good talk. So what I have been doing myself, but also recommending to others, is go to places that force you to give a story or a presentation in public that are not about work. Whether this is a poetry reading, whether this is your local debate club or a storytelling platform. There's so many really interesting groups out there where people come together to share philosophy or culture or art in a public speaking format without resorting to corporate lingo and to hiding behind what you're doing at work. And I'm telling you, it's just gonna help you be better at presenting, whether it's your art or whether it's your Excel files or your report or whatever you're doing at work.
And as someone who trains people in their social skills and works with people that want to maybe find friends in a new city that they've moved to, giving a small talk like this will make you an item of interest for a lot of people there. So I've run events where part of the event structure was that volunteers could give a 7-minute talk, and they would just be invited to come up in front of everyone, talk about whatever they want. People talked about oranges, about their journey through therapy, One talked about his escape from Syria, and so many different topics. But at the end of each talk, people came up to that person and said, well, this was really interesting. Tell me more about this. Tell me more about this. You kind of put your story out there and the spotlight on you, so that you no longer, for that evening at least, you're no longer chase people, for the lack of a better word, but you have a lot of people come to you to ask questions and hear more about that story that you have to tell. And I think if we all were better and more prepared to give small little talks, presentations, tell stories, that's the best word of putting it. If we all were able to tell stories a little bit more and more freely, we would be talking a lot more with each other, and we would be watching a lot less TV, YouTube, TikTok, and so on.
Agreed. And I mean, you can also do that with friends. I don't know, have you heard of PowerPoint karaoke?
Yeah, I am banned from PowerPoint karaoke in 15 countries. No, I've heard of PowerPoint karaoke. It's amazing, but please explain what that is.
Michael, we really should do that once.
We should do a psychologist off the clock PowerPoint karaoke competition. I'm just putting that out there.
Sign me up for that. I am coming. I'm joining online or in person because I love PowerPoint karaoke. The point here is that you are given a presentation that you have never seen before in your life, and you have to perform it slide by slide in front of a group of strangers who have paid a tiny amount of money to gather at some bar or pub or dark corner of your local bar community to just listen to you. And usually it is so wonderfully funny. You cannot imagine. I have seen artists giving presentations about grammar. I have seen people giving presentations about clothes in the Middle Ages. There's so many really wonderful topics out there, and those presentations are actually designed to be funny. They're full of odd, weird effects that are just there to basically troll you. And PowerPoint karaoke is something I've been doing with friends at parties, at birthdays. It's truly a wonderful way to train your public speaking skills by having a laugh. And just like what you said before, and just also have the joy and the curiosity to try it out and have a good time with it in a no pressure environment.
So the person giving the presentation has never seen any of the slides, and someone else is advancing the slides forward. So you might be talking about the diagram on this slide and make something up. And then the next slide like shows a chicken crossing a road, and you have to make up something. How that is connected to. Okay, I'm just going to put that out there. We're going to do a psychologist off the clock PowerPoint karaoke. Hopefully at a later point, so that a glass of wine or champagne wouldn't be amiss. Yeah, excellent. Okay, that's happening.
But yeah, so these are my tips. Really try to gather as much experience as possible when it comes to public speaking, but perhaps to circle back to what we started off with, right? With giving a TED or a TEDx talk. I oftentimes get mails or texts from people that have a very moving story or a very unique story, something that is incredibly funny or interesting, but there's no idea behind it. And I always advise that there's many interesting platforms to share their story there, but I'm very protective of the TED and the TEDx format, really showcasing intellectually interesting ideas. Again, not necessarily the ones that I agree with. Some of my favorite TED Talks or showcase ideas that I think are kind of wild, but they are different. This is what I mean with the magic of TED. For me, these events feel like it's a conference for the intellectually curious that are interested in hearing a little bit about psychology and law and the arts and science and tech and biology and architecture. And you get all of these exciting ideas packaged in beautiful storytelling in 1 or in 2 or in 3 days. So if you have a great idea, this is the space to really pitch it and showcase it.
Now let's go from the intellectual wonderland that such a conference can be to the situations where most of us might find ourselves when we're doing a presentation, which is it's going to get dry, it's going to get boring, I'm sorry. But which of those techniques would we also apply when we have to give a presentation at work, where for a researcher, there are a lot of like slides and numbers that need to kind of come up. How would we still make those? Let me paint the driest picture of them all. A 45-minute presentation with a lot of PowerPoint in front of a professional audience. Now, of course, we can't bring out a lot of those techniques, but would there be some ways in which we can still liven that presentation up?
Pyrotechnics. No, just kidding.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, that's a given. That's a given.
I think, look, what I always ask myself is, why am I presenting you this presentation? Why am I taking up all of this time and your energy to talk to you? And what is it that I think I need to bring across to make this presentation valuable for you? Now, this can be either in the case of a scientific presentation, and I've seen that in the past because I have a background in research. This can start off with a problem, meaning we have this problem in research, we have a problem with a methodology, or we have a huge research gap that we need to address. And this is how I did it. And this is why it's relevant for you, because you most likely will come across the same issue with your methodology, and I'm here to help you. In terms of other kinds of presentations, if you are presenting your annual report, you most likely will do so to colleagues that are not in your discipline or not in your department. So ask yourself, why should they even listen to me? Why is this relevant for them? And once you have solved this question, once you have really understood why your presentation is relevant to the ones that are listening, this needs to run like a red thread throughout your entire presentation. Really make sure to either visually or rhetorically highlight important aspects of the presentation. Make sure to always remind them, look, I'm showing you this because I know in 5 months you will have the same issue and I'm here to help you. Or because I finally found out that this and that. So always remind people that there's value, hopefully, in the time and the attention they're giving. Because at the end of the day, their time and their attention is a gift, and they're sharing it with you. So you really need to be respectful of that and make sure to, help them make the most out of it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that advice. I see the presentations that are being done in 2025 just be 100% better, just because of that. And then an additional 75% when pyrotechnics are added. All right, Alina, we're coming up on our time here. Is there anything in regards to TED or TEDx or public speaking in general that you wish we had covered and we didn't yet?
I mean, there's so much to talk about here. I think we could sit for another 3 hours and still not be done with it. But at the end of the day, I feel public speaking is just such an intense human experience. Whether you like it or not, whether you've given only one presentation in your entire life or whether this is something that you do as a job, this is a very intense human experience. It's a very unnatural human experience to stand in front of hundreds of strangers that are there to judge you and look at you. So I always recommend just try it out. Even if you do it once and you bomb and you feel embarrassed about it, do it once because it's fun to just try it out and to then return and go back home and think and be proud of yourself of at least trying it out.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, I have one last question and I've saved it to the end because everyone's going to wonder when I ask this question. I know we will get a ton of emails if I don't ask this question. So here it comes. We all saw this coming. Someone listening thinks, okay, I want to give a TEDx talk. This has been one of my dreams. I've always wanted to give a TEDx talk. what would be your recommendation? Where should they go?
So first of all, because I have seen many people coming over to me and telling me it's been on my bucket list to give a TEDx talk. First of all, ask yourself why it is. Is it because you want to be on that platform? Is it because you think it will professionally catapult you to a better place? What is the motivation behind it? And if it's not about the idea, then it shouldn't be a TED talk or a TEDx talk. You really need to find an idea that you think deserves to be listened and understood and heard by the people out there, by the world out there. And everybody, or many people, do have an idea that is interesting to share. And this idea doesn't need to be new. It might be a new perspective to an ancient or an old idea. But really think about the idea that you want to bring to the table. And once you have that, and once you feel, yes, this is something that I believe needs to be out there, you can search for local TEDx organizers, get in touch with them, prepare a proposal that is scientifically accurate, make sure that you don't promote any products or services, because again, this is only about the idea. This is not about you promoting a business or a brand. And then find an outlet that you think is interesting, find people that you like to work with, and get ready to be coached for a lot of months.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Get ready for that. Thank you so much, Alina. This was a huge pleasure. Where would you like to send people that are now really curious about both your work and TED and TEDx in general?
So feel free to reach out over LinkedIn, the place where everybody goes now because Facebook and all of the rest is well occupied by all of my crazy uncles at this stage. So feel free to say hi over LinkedIn. If you live in Vienna, let's go for a coffee. I'm always up to chat and meet interesting new people. And we're hosting a European official TED event this year, end of September, at the Imperial Palace in Vienna. It's gonna be huge. It's not a TEDx event, but an actual official European TED event. It's a 3-day conference dedicated to artificial intelligence with ideas from all corners of life. And just prepare for this really, really beautiful adventure. Reach out. And Michael, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure also chatting with you again. And sign me up for the PowerPoint karaoke. Don't forget about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So listeners, in all seriousness, if you are up for a PowerPoint karaoke, shoot me an email. I just want to see if this is of interest, and maybe Alina can join us as well and rock this together with us. Alina, again, this was a huge pleasure. Thank you so much for all the amazing insights you shared with us. And thanks for the amazing things that you folks do. TEDx has changed my life to a non-insignificant degree. And so I'm happy that more people hear about this amazing platform. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review or contributing on Patreon.
You can get more psychology tips by subscribing to our newsletter and connecting with us on social media.
We'd like to thank our podcast production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.